Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to put together our book review API. So we're going to see how we can add a post request to our Python-based API. We're also going to see how we can store data in Airtable. So we're going to be able to push and pull data programmatically using the Airtable API. I think we cover some valuable information in this tutorial, so I hope that you all enjoy it. This video builds off of the previous video that I posted. So if you haven't seen that yet, you can check it out, link in the description, but you also can probably just watch this as a standalone video. If you have any questions throughout this video, feel free to let me know in the comments, but I think let's just get right into the video. All right, let's set up the book review API, and note, I want to make sure that you have access to completed code in here. So like in master, there's the book review py and app.py that connects the pieces. So you can always look at that for reference, but let's try to do it from scratch just so we know how to set this up. All right, so how do we do that? So I'm going to work off of a different branch just so we kind of keep master unaffected. To do that, I will do git checkout-b book review. I'm on a new branch book review. If I do Gitlog, we can kind of see what our commit history is. I have this nice little alias Gitlog. I'll share this on the description of what this is, this full command is. Basically, an alias lets you do like a shortcut. So you can do a longer command just as a quick short command. But this Gitlog shows me like my history. So we're on this book review branch now. And just for the sake of this, I'm going to delete bookreview.py real quick. And I'm going to delete app.py. And ultimately, I'm going to change main template to, we'll change the name of that to app.py. And we're going to build off of that. Now, what do we want to do? So what I mentioned at the start of this video was that the book review API would let you do a GET request to get all of the books you've rated and just like order them, etc. And then there would also be a like review book endpoint that would post to a database and actually upload a new rating based off of that. So to do this, I think a nice lightweight database, not a traditional database, but I think it's great for practicing and getting used to, setting up a database for an API. We're going to use a platform called Airtable. So you can go to airtable.com and create an account. Once you create an account, you're going to want to go into your account space here. You want to go into Developer Hub, and you're going to want to create a new personal access token. So I'll call this like book review token. And then with the scopes, you'll want to read and write to records. You can add additional access as well. Create token, copy this. I'm going to delete this token after the video is uploaded, so you're not going to be able to use my token. I'll also kind of tell you some good practices to keep this secure. But what we're going to want to do is let's create a new file called bookreview.py. Cool. And my API key equals this. Really bad practice to show your full API key in plain text like this. So what we want to do, and as I said before, I'm going to delete this so you can't utilize this. But what we want to do is wrap this as an environment variable. So I'm going to import OS. I'm going to copy this. I'll put a link in the description on how to set environment variables. I'm going to just kind of quickly do that behind the scenes. If you're curious on how I'm doing this, I'm using a MacBook right now, so I'm going to add my environment variable to my ZSHRC file to the bottom of it as export Airtable key, I'll call it, equals that key that you just saw on the screen, and wrap that in quotes. Okay, so we have this key, and now basically what I did is I wrapped it as an environment variable. Again, I'll put in the description how to do this, but I called it Airtable key. If I run this, it doesn't work. I'm going to real quick refresh my .zshrc file. And if I run it again, if I print the key, obviously, again, you don't ever want to like print and show what your key is. I'm going to delete this because everyone would have access, but we see that key that we intended to have there. Okay, so now what do we do with Airtable? Why are we using Airtable? Well, it's just basically like a super easy way to connect. It's like a Google Sheets in a lot of regards, but it's way easier to connect to programmatically, in my opinion. So I like it as a easy, lightweight thing to like just create a simple database. So I'm going to create a new base. Start from scratch. Just call this book reviews table. We'll call this reviews. And so we see we can have, very much like a spreadsheet. I'm going to call this book notes. That sounds good. And then rating. The rating should be of type, not user, of like value. New number, yeah, number. Or like that. I think you could probably like limit what is allowed here. And I don't need a status. So we're going to delete this field. How do I delete? Oh, delete field, here we go. Book, notes, rating. As I mentioned before, I'm currently listening to / reading, whatever you, does this count? I'm listening to an audiobook, a book called Red Rising, and it's been very solid so far. So I'm giving it a 7.6 out of 10. Pretty stringent on these ratings. So that's a very good score. But basically, I want to be able to update this table programmatically from our API. So how could we do that? I think one thing we want to do is we need to set up the actual Python code to do that before we can wrap an API layer around it. So if you look up Python plus Airtable library, you should run into this PyAirtable client, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, PyAirtable, pretty helpful in my opinion. So pip install PyAirtable. Again, it should already have it because you installed it in the requirements.txt. But we can see there's a quick start example here that just lets us get a table. So I'm going to just copy this code. We're going to paste it into our book review file. We already have OS, we don't need that. I'm going to move this up a bit. This line API equals API OS environment Airtable API key. All we have to do is just change this to API Airtable key because that's what we called it in our environment variables. I'm going to delete this now. We see it's wrapped in the function API. And then we need the app example base ID and the table example ID. To get those, it wasn't super clear to me at first, but after doing some digging, you can get the table ID through this. And then I think the base ID is this app one right here. So table ID is right here, paste that in. And then the app ID was the stuff in the slashes over here. Command C to copy that. And I'm going to paste that in here. So if we're lucky, not lucky, if we're done this correctly, we're not worried. When we print table.all, we should get that Red Rising rating. Oh no, what did we do wrong? Oh, we didn't give this any access, this book review token. So I actually have to go back here and we want it to have access to book reviews table. So hopefully now it works. Command S, can run this. Hey, look at that, we got it. Sweet. So we get these objects. I think there's probably 2 rows in that table, if I have to guess. Or multiple, yeah, 3 rows. If I delete these, what happens? Okay, actually, yeah, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now it should just be the red rising one because we deleted that. Look at that, cool. And for example, if you wanted to grab certain things, I could do like table.all /0 /fields, and then get like the book. And we should now just print out red rising. And just for context, red rising is like fantasy, sci-fi fantasy. My friend that really likes Lord of the Rings recommended it to me, so maybe like that type of vibe in a way. Cool. All right. We have this little table set up, and that's actually set up our API endpoints to add to this and to get all our reviews back. All right, so the way that I would go about this, before we make GET requests and POST requests to actually modify this table, let's actually set up some Python code to do the same. So I might do like def get book ratings pass, and I might do like def add book rating pass. We can determine what variables we need to add into this. So for good code practice, I might wrap this with like a class like book review. Might do this type stuff as like the initial setup. So def init self.api equals yup, table equals yup. Cool. That's just copying from above. Perfect. Self. And we might have some optional parameters here, and then like self, then probably would need to require a book title and like a book rating. And maybe some notes, which is optional. Okay, which one should we do first? I would say it's probably easier to just do the get request here. So I'd recommend going to the Airtable docs and just looking to see what we can do here, working with tables. We want to get all records. So we're going to use the all command that we're already using. Okay, this might be helpful here to sort. Cool. So kind of work through this, see if it makes sense. Looks like there's this max records that we could use to only return a certain amount. So I'm feeling sort and like max records might be useful here. Like we probably want to sort by rating and maybe get only a certain number. So how could we do that? Well, we could do self.table.all. This is just like what we had before, using a class. If we want to pass in some optional arguments, I guess I could start off by just returning see what happens here. Get book ratings. Let's see what happens here. Cool, that still works. Let's start adding some additional ratings. So maybe actually it makes sense to add book ratings first, just because then we can have actual book ratings to play around with to test this. So how would we add a book rating? Well, if we look back at the documentation here, we probably want to update a record or create a record. So this create will be helpful. And we want to use the Airtable method, not the Airtable endpoint. It's probably most helpful to do this. We don't need a batch create. We can just do a create. So So it seems like, I think we'll have to play around with this a bit, but it seems like if we just pass in an object, like in the expected syntax that we already have when we're retrieving things. So we want to probably add book field and a rating field. So fields equals, I'm going to just do like book, then pass in book title. Okay, perfect. I love this Copilot. It's being very helpful here. And then I think all we have to do is like a table dot or self dot table dot create fields equals fields and see what happens here when we call this. So we're going to do br dot add book rating. Let's think of some other books that I've read recently. Just read a book called Dopamine Nation. It's just basically about our addiction to dopamine, always on our devices. A lot of people having issues with drugs, alcohol, etc., and just kind of like some methods of why that is, how to counteract that, how to have the right levels of dopamine. It was an interesting read. Nothing like earth-shattering, but I think some good reminders of just ways to operate healthily in this world. So I'll probably give this like a 6.8. I don't need a quote here. So the two required fields are book title and book rating. So I'm passing it in like that. I don't need to add notes. Could do that. I can show that in a sec. And we don't need to print this out. We can just do br.addBookRating. Let's see if this works. I have no idea if it will. Run this file. Okay, there was no errors. So the matter is, look at that, it added it. And just to show this actually is doing something, maybe I add notes this time. Notes. Good read, nothing earth-shattering, but some solid recommendations on healthy behaviors. Sure. Write that. So now we have notes populated. It's not going to just default to none. Run this file. Go back. Look at that. Now we have a notes field there. Cool. So now we have a way to retrieve this information. I'm going to delete the second one. Let's add another book. What was another read that I have read? We'll go with Deep Work by Cal Newport. So I'm going to just call it Deep Work. This one's just basically about tricks and tips to kind of conquer your work schedule, not be distracted. Kind of on the same theme as this dopamine nation. There's so many distractions in the world. How can you get on top of it? I thought it was interesting. Thought I had some good tips. Again, some things to add into my own work routines. I would probably give this about the same score as Dopamine Nation, 6.8. So I'm going to run this. See, we have another word there. I'm trying to think of like other books that I've read recently. I'm currently reading Infinite Jest, and I've been reading it for so long. It's such a long book. Interesting, but it's just hard to read the full thing. It's just so massive that I feel like it's like there's a lot of beautiful like writing in it, but I don't know. I think just the pure length maybe is just hard for me to manage. So I've enjoyed it, but it hasn't been like my absolute favorite. So, what should I give that? I don't know, like 7.0. I think just like, I gotta give it a high rating just for the pure size and the amount of different storylines all interacting together. It's definitely a piece of art, but just it's a lot and a little harder to truly enjoy in the same way as like a Lord of the Rings or Ender's Game, some of my favorite like sci-fi fantasy type books. This is not sci-fi fantasy. This is based at like a tennis academy, but run that. Cool, now we have some books to work off of, and let's see how our get all books code works. Cool, we see we're getting all of our book ratings. Now we want to just see if we can sort this. So maybe we do a sort equals, We want the rating column, so rating. See what happens here. If we go to the API reference now too, all records, how does the sort work? We can add the column names passed as a list, and if you want to reverse the order, you can do this a minus sign. So we should just be able to do rating here. And I think we want to make this, maybe we have a default sort, so probably ascending or descending. I think that this would be by default. If sort is equal to, how about descending, then I think we want to do rating equals like this. This is kind of weird syntax. So sort equals rating. And we pass it in as a list. So I know it's a bit clunky. There's probably better ways to do this, but I think I'm going to pass it in like this, like this. And I think this will be a list too if we need it to be. All right, let's see what happens. Run the file. 6.8, 6.8, 7, 7.6. So I think if we pass in sort equals descending, we'll get it the other way. Perfect, yep, that's downwards. And then we could do also like limiting the number of like max records. Maybe we'd say 10 by default. If we wanted to do that, there's a couple of ways. You could either do like up to max records and just kind of use the list comprehension way of doing it, or like list processing way. Or you could also probably pass in the max records field. Run that. So we'll get everything. If we made max records equal to 1, happens. We should get just one response. Look at that, cool. All right, so we have all the like Python code in place. Now it's just a matter of wrapping it in a couple API endpoints. So to do that, I think we're going to do it in a similar type way to how we made that process text endpoint. And if we wanted to, we could just completely remove these classes. So let's start with the get request. Now I want you to make an endpoint called all reviews that retrieves a list of book review Python dictionaries. It can include optional parameters, sort, and max records. The previous code I shared as a template. This looks pretty good. This book reviews is what we're getting from our database though, so I'm gonna go ahead and copy this in. Paste this as a new class. All reviews, cool. Takes in sort as optional. ascending, descending. I'm just going to make this match what we had. So ascending, ascending, all caps. And then also it takes in max records, which is also optional, which is an integer. This doesn't have an author. I'm going to just call book underscore title, book underscore rating, and book notes. You can name these whatever you want. You'll see how this works in a sec. So get sort, get max records, and we'll say the default is equal to, I don't know, 10. You don't need to do default equals 10. You could just do 10 if you wanted to. I guess the default it's kind of nice little way to make it a little bit more readable. And then we want to import the library that we have. So import book review. We probably want to have just our base book review class set up. I might just call this BR. This might not be the best syntax in the world to use here. I'll make this lowercase br. Definitely probably better ways to do this, but I want to do this efficiently. So if sort equals ascending, br dot get book ratings paste this in. I suppose we could just assume just making some minor modifications. I'm going to say this can be none. Do I like that? I feel like this might error out now with the sort. These are semantics. They're Python semantics. Not the end of the world if they're not perfect, but I'll call this book reviews too. We don't actually need the limited reviews here because that's all getting handled in could just add some logic here if sort, not sort, so if sort is none, then we could just immediately return like this, make this an elif. Cool, this should work. Perfect. So we can just return the book reviews. Perfect, that's one endpoint. And now we want to add a second endpoint. We probably should check if this works though. So we can run our code, app.py, run that. Hopefully this is saved. Command click, API docs. We see we have book reviews, all reviews. Try it out. We want just like 2 records, what happens? Look at that, we just got 2 records. If we wanted the descending 2 records, try that out. Sweet. That is very cool. That looks good. And notice like we could pass in the all reviews endpoint. One thing that's nice too that it did for us with the docstring annotations is it broke it into book reviews. And the way that it did that, if you look at this, the tags, we have text processing here. But when we look at our book reviews tag, it's book reviews here. And just because I don't think I have highlighted it, if you're curious about like ways to do these docstrings to get this documentation, look up Flasgger. And then you can kind of scroll down and see the different ways you can pass in the docstrings here. There's different formats. So Flasgger is helpful. You also might look up Flask RESTful to see some more details, but this should be helpful. I'll probably pass this in the description of the video for reference. Okay, we're so close. Let's just add our post review endpoint. So are we going to do this? And I'm going to say, now let's make one final endpoint, post review. I want it to require a book and a review field. And optionally take in notes. And then based on these input parameters, add a book to our database. You can use the following code as reference, and just because it's probably helpful here, we'll use what we ended up using for the all reviews.
Run that.
Note this is going to be a little bit different. I don't want to inform data. I want to use actually pass it in the body of a post request. That's probably the best practice here. So I'm going to tell it to change input to be in the post body. And so now we see request body is true. This is the database add, but it's just doing a kind of a simple call to a list. Copy all this code. Yeah, notes is optional, so we note that it doesn't necessarily get something. It could be an empty string here. New review. We can do br dot, what is our function again? Br dot add book rating. Add book rating. And instead of doing it with this format, what actually we'll want to do is just do book, review, and notes. We don't need this here. All right, this is the exciting part. Will this post request work? And we're using a post request because we're changing, actual database, which is our table. So we're going to go back to our docs, refresh this. We see we have post review, no parameters. I don't think I like how it formatted the doc strings here with this request body. I think ideally it should be more similar to what we had here. So I'm going to actually copy this. And I think just instead of in form data, it's going to do in body. And this is just through, like, the reason I remember this is just through having done this a decent amount of times. Let's see what happens now. I only want one body. I'm going to reference some of my previous examples real quick. Okay, just looking at how I did this previously, and there's different ways. I like this approach with a schema. Then we'll have basically a book review object. Cool, I'm going to do this. Paste this in as parameters. And we want book, rating. I'm going to keep these lowercase, and then optionally we'll have the notes, but that won't be required. There you go. Okay, let's see what happens behind the scenes with our endpoint. Refresh this. Perfect, that looks much better. Lord of the Rings. Good book, good book. Great read. Excellently written. And I'm just, obviously there's multiple books in the series. I'll give it an 8.3. Run that. Book and review are required fields. Oh, I'd have rating here, and it's expecting review. Yeah, so this should be rating, I guess, with how I change this. Run it again. Looks like it went through. Sweet. And now if we look at our table, we see we get Lord of the Rings there. That's awesome. If we tried, let's say, running, what was the endpoint here? Post review. I'm going to just do all reviews real quick. If we just do a GET request on that, params here would be like max records equals 3. I try to do HTTPS. This is just locally running. Bet you now it will work. Look at that. Yep, we get 3 books. We could sort it in descending. Cool. Look at that. All right, and finally, let's deploy this live. So probably worthwhile just showing how you would do a post request via this case, we'd have body equals book. I don't know if I would say the Great Gatsby was an 8.0. I like the Great Gatsby. I'll give it, because it is a classic, I'll give it at least a 7. Book, rating, notes. Base URL, I think we do body equals body in this situation, and now we're not doing all reviews, we're doing, I think, add review, is that what we called it? Post review. I don't really like post underscore review. I think I would probably change this to something like review. And then you do the post request to the review endpoint. It's kind of redundant. Yeah, redundant if you do it this way. If you don't do it this, if you post underscore reviews and then you post request to post underscore reviews. Okay, let's see if we add the Great Gatsby. Oh no. Unexpected argument. Python requests post example. Let's see. I guess maybe data is our body here. Do I pass this in as JSON? That worked. Okay, I guess we had to pass it in as JSON. Cool. So now we see we added the Great Gatsby. Sweet. It is here. Okay, final step. Let's commit this code. Git add -u. You can also add that API request test. Git add API. Commit -m. Final code, we'll say. And now we want to push that. Git push origin book review, because we're on the book review branch. If we go to GitHub, go to this. See, we book review had recent pushes less than a minute ago. If we go into render, basically I just want to show that this is live and working. If we go to render, we can actually change it to run from a different branch by doing edit branch. We want to do book review, save changes. One thing that's interesting too is that it won't know where that Airtable key is. So we need to specify that in the environment section of render, which is a nice little feature they have. So we want to say that our Airtable key is equal to the value that you have securely saved recently. Again, I'm going to delete my key, so it's okay if you end up seeing it here. You don't actually need to surround it with quotes or anything here. You can just paste in the value directly. Come on, let's go. We also probably need to change our build command now that we have a file called app. It should be app. So this first one is the file name, and this is the object or the variable within the file that you're actually running. That's why it's app. Okay, let's let this deploy, and I'll fast forward, and then we'll see our final deployed API, baby. Okay, we're getting a syntax error when we deploy Airtable, and if you see deploy failed, if you see the issue, it's using what's known as like a walrus operator, I think, in this code. I don't know what version of Python that we're running, but you can specify a later Python version and make sure that it has that by doing Python version, and let's just specify like 3.10.0, or what's the best version of 10? Newest Python 10 version. 3.10.10. I think that should work. So render just understands that if you set this, that it should build with a different Python. And that walrus operator is, yeah, it was like an addition, I think, in Python like 3.9 or something. So you needed like 3.9 or above. I forget what version. Walrus operator Python edition. 3.8. So 3.8 or greater to properly use the Airtable library. Cool, the service is live, we see. If you ever run into any issues too when you're deploying, some things you can try is you can like deploy a specific commit as well as clear the build cache and deploy or restart the service. Might be useful. But now that we've deployed, let's take this URL. Let's go back to our handy dandy code and paste in this URL. And let's add another book. I'm trying to think of a book. We'll do The Alchemist. That was like a good classic. Just a nice, easy read. I'm going to leave the text here. It's also a classic. Run that. All right, so this is a real endpoint. Let's see if it added. Look, The Alchemist has been added. Sweet. If we also go to this endpoint, copy it. Oh, no, don't want quotes around it. We run that and we go to API docs. We see that the API docs are living on a real endpoint. That's exciting. We could do like the get all reviews here. Descending, let's get 5 max. Look at that. Gives us our 5. And then finally, if we wanted to do the all reviews endpoint, I think it was underscore all reviews. Let's double check. All reviews, we could do a get request on that. Get params equal params. Let's see what happens. We want to print a response. Print response.json. Look at that, sweet. Okay, we have a live API with a URL on render. You could, yeah, as I mentioned before, if you wanted to change this to your own domain, go to settings, add custom domain. That would help you out there. I'm trying to think of other things. I mean, if we were to move on to make this a little bit more sophisticated, what I would say is instead of using like a Airtable, I would probably recommend using like a Postgres DB and then using Python SQL Alchemy to actually make the commands to get and push data and pull data from that Postgres DB. You could also deploy Postgres DBs within render here. So one thing to think about. Try to think of other things. Other things you might want to know about is what do you do if you wanted to add like an API key to your API? Because right now this API is publicly accessible, so you guys can probably hit the API I've shared. It might keep it up for a bit just so you can play around with it. But if you wanted to like have your own API key to make sure that people are authenticated to make requests, I'll put a code snippet like in the description on what that might look like. You basically just need to like annotate, have a little like annotation on these classes, or basically a Python decorator it's called above these to make them only accessible with an API key. So I'll add a little code snippet to the description file there. Just look up like I'll probably call it like API key code snippet : GitHub link. So check that out. Other things, I don't know. If there's things that I didn't cover in this video, please let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can either respond via the comments or maybe make a longer version of this video or just a follow-up version where we do some of these more advanced things. But this is a great start. You could share these API docs with another developer on your team and they could access some of the code that you write. You can wrap any code you want, within this type of syntax, so very good to know. But I think that is it. Awesome. Thank you all for watching. I hope that this video has been informative to deploy a Python API pretty quickly. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to throw it a thumbs up and also subscribe if you haven't already. I'm trying to make some more videos these days. I feel like I always say that, but maybe this time it will actually happen. So let me know in the comments what I should make next. Alrighty. Also, let me know in the comments what books that you like and what ratings you would add to this database. I'm always looking for new books. So yeah, maybe throw some books there. What are some books you like? All right. Thank you all for watching. Until next time, peace.